and then the cart just stops and it starts vibrating like this. I'm like, what is going on? And then it just, boom, shoots up into the sky. Yeah, I'm Nate Purkeypile, and I've been in the games industry for 17 years now, and 14 of those years were at Bethesda, working on, Skyrim, Fallout 3, Fallout 4, as a lead artist on Fallout 76. I was the lead artist on Point Lookout and The Pit also.
Oh.
And I've left now to do my own indie thing, solo indie thing. So I've founded Just Purkeygames because it's just me. So that's what I'm up to now, making like a Unreal Engine 5 open world horror game.
Oh, so can you tell us about the stuff that you're working on? I went onto your site to try and see if I could see very much, and how much can you tell us?
Well, I'm still working on like the big full announcement, so those are like the main things that I'm telling people now.
Gotcha.
So
keep it generic, keep it broad.
Talking more about it, yeah. But wanted to be like a big put it out there. It's cool. Going great. Like that engine's amazing. Yeah,
is it? So I mean, I haven't had any chance to do anything with it as far as 3D or environments or anything like that. Like what sort of things are you playing around with in there?
Well, one of the big things they have is they call it nanite, and it's basically like geometry has been this huge restriction on games forever. Like, oh, you can only have 1 million polys on screen at any time, and you have to do all this stuff to make it super optimal.
Right.
And that one, it's just like, oh, you want 1 billion polys? That's fine, because it just sort of aggressively calls it down. Because if you think about it, you really only need like a triangle per pixel.
Right.
Really? So it kind of runs with that idea and does something similar to like the mega texturing that they did in the IDS games with textures, but it does it with geometry instead. So you can just throw tons of geometry at it.
Really? So now you can have rocks with little textures and things that aren't where you don't have to replicate things or scale up or scale down, things like that.
Yeah, you'll go like really close to pebbles, and you'll see pebbles, like really small rocks all in there, not just fake normal maps anymore.
Wow.
Like, it can have the real stuff there.
Wow. That's really cool. Now, environments are your thing, right?
Right. So it's very exciting.
Yeah. And lighting, too. I mean, that's also been your background, is a lot lighting and environments.
Yeah. So they're real-time lighting, and it's amazing, too.
Wow. So when you pick up something and move it around to adjust it, you literally are picking up, adjusting it, and seeing it render in real time.
Yeah, you can like open up a hole in a cave and just see that light bounce through from a sunbeam all around. Like that actually works without having to sit there and bake everything.
Wow, that is so cool. What level of computer do you have though when you're doing some of this?
I got kind of a ridiculous one, but
do you?
Yeah, I mean, I got like a Threadripper and a 3090, but what I need to actually make a game is not the same as what you'll need to run it, especially like in a few years when it's actually done.
Sure.
Because I'm usually running like the editor, and editors always run a little bit worse than like the final shipped game. But then I'll open up like Blender and ZBrush and Substance Painter all at the same time. So kind of like put it through its paces.
Yeah, so I mean, take us into that. What are some of the programs you're commonly using to create your environments and to do what you do?
Yeah, I'm using quite a few now that I kind of have to do all of it. And like Blender is my go-to for most 3D things now.
Okay. Like
it's replaced 3D Studio Max for me. I really like it, and it's continues to improve, which I can't say the same for Max. Like I've used that since release 2 back in like 99 or something like that, and it's really not that different. And so Blender, they're doing a great job with the open source movement and everything.
Yeah, really this is a free program. I mean, right? I mean, it's yeah.
Like they get grants from people and stuff, but yeah it's free. Anyone can go get it.
Yeah, my son's doing a 3D. He's going through to be a 3D animator, going through college right now, and that's of course that and Maya are the two that it seems like they're focusing on most.
Yeah, in Maya, I do hear from animators like they prefer it a little bit more, and I can see that. Like animation's a pretty technical thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot to get right there. But I wouldn't be surprised if that changes too at some point.
Sure.
I'm going to say like, oh, it's caught up enough. But for my needs, like, I'm doing a solo game. I'm not going to do like Naughty Dog level animation here. I'm going to do the best I can. But
so when you left Bethesda, did you already have in mind the game that you were going to do, or did you just generally have the idea that you were going to start doing something.
Yeah, it was more general like that. And then I just wrote down this whole list of ideas. And at first it was like, maybe I should do all these different prototypes. But there was this one that I liked the most.
Uh-huh.
And, they say don't do the giant game for your first indie game.
Right.
So I did the giant game for my first indie game.
Is it just you? I mean, do you have a team at all, or are you doing this whole thing on your own?
I have one person helping me, and that's a composer. That's it. And that's just like a temporary contract thing for like 6 months or so.
Oh, wow.
Because music to me is like a really important part of the game.
Yeah.
And without giving away who it is, I went to license some music for the game because I have like always really liked this one metal band. And I got the music licensing and stuff handled, which is like this whole thing with lawyers and it's super complicated. But one of the people in the band, he was like, hey, are you looking for anyone to do music for your game?
No.
Yeah. Like, are you kidding me?
Wow. Well, that's pretty cool. So it's worth reaching out to people.
Yeah, because I just sent that email like on a whim. I was like, they're probably not even going to respond, but this would be my best choice for music. I might as well send it. Found their email. There you go.
You can't say who it is, huh? It's secret.
Yeah, top secret.
Is it? That's cool, though. Yeah, you're pretty into. Yeah, because was looking through some of your stuff. You make a lot of comments and analogies that use heavy metal and things like that. I noticed. You made a comment as far as being a solo game developer. I wanted to ask you about. You said I think it's good to go into at least a little bit worried. If you're not worried, that's probably a red flag. So jumping in 100% with a basic idea is worthwhile. It's good to have some risk in the game or some skin in the game.
Yeah. I mean, it's like a really complicated thing to do a whole game and every aspect of it.
Right.
So,
was that your plan originally to do it all on your own, or?
Yeah, I thought it would be not easy, and that's kind of why I wanted to do it, because I wanted to learn about all those different things. Because some people, they're just like, I really like doing characters. That's what I'm going to do.
Right.
And even though I've done world art for a long time, I was never a world artist. I always thought of myself as a developer, I suppose. And that's why I was always like butting in on like these design meetings, like, hey, we should change this weapon in this way and balance this and this quest line.
What sort of things have you had influence in as far as tweaking or changing some things inside some of the worlds that you've been involved in?
Well, besides the usual play test notes, I would say that like 76 was a big one because I was in all of the recurring meetings after ship for like how we wanted to fix and improve that game and make it something that everybody liked. Not that it was terrible in ship, but it had issues, and I think it got a lot better, especially when it comes to like the Wastelanders update when we brought NPCs back and everything. That was the major turning point for that game.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, I was looking through some of your artwork that you've done. I mean, these are the worlds that you've been involved with and things, but I mean, like, we're not talking small scale. We're not talking about a room that you built. We're talking, or something like that. I mean, these are like very large in a real world. If we could scale it up to real world size, I mean, we're talking city size or bigger. The space station, for example. I mean, that seems like a bit of a project. How long do those sorts of things take you to develop?
It really depends, because like I would say Diamond City comparison, that one was probably like 5 or 6 months spread out throughout Fallout 4. So that one was pretty involved. On the other hand, the space station, maybe 3 weeks tops.
No, what? Really? How?
Yeah, because I really just snuck in that spaceship. Well, it's not really sneaking in if I'm the art lead, but I put in that space station in the base game, but it didn't really have that much going on there. And then we decided, well, it needs to be a city, but I was also really busy as an art lead, but I wanted to do it because it was like my thing. So I just broke it apart even more, arranged it like a city, and like cluttered up shops and all that. So it's really reusing lots of existing stuff for that. There's not that much custom stuff, but because you have this gigantic crash space station, like that really sticks out in your head versus no one gives a shit about the little bar. Like, I don't have to make a new bar. We have plenty of those and chairs and vehicles.
Right.
So there's all of the art of 76 and Fallout 4 that you can just bring in and just sort of rearrange.
Yeah.
And I'd been at that point, that's like 7 years of Fallout 4 alone. So I was pretty familiar with what we had.
So you do have a library of stuff to pull from. Do you end up building some things though too in order to, I don't know, tweak or I mean,
yeah.
pieces are great, but it's hard.
Depends on the needs.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, that's great. How many people did you typically work with?
As the art lead on 76?
Yeah.
I mean, the art team, I think, was usually about 50 people, but then it went down after ship as more people moved to Starfield.
Okay.
So closer to like 20 at that point. Yeah. And that was split between Austin and Rockville also. So there was like all the meetings were video conferencing. So for some people, it's like, oh, there's a pandemic. You're going to have to get used to all these video conferencing meetings. And it's like, I've been doing this for years.
Right. Yeah, there's more than one location. I don't think people do realize that. In fact, you go on their website.
Up to 4 now.
Is it really? Yeah, and they have opportunities for people to also do, like, not necessarily an internship, but coming in and to learn and things there, I saw.
Yeah, that's a good opportunity.
What about, like, Skyrim? How many people would you typically work with on that?
Skyrim was a lot smaller. Like, the entire team on that game was around 100 people. So
was it really?
Our team was like 30-ish or so on that one.
Wow. Yeah, that is a lot more intimate.
Yeah, that was back when we were in the basement. Yeah,
really?
The building, too. So things have certainly grown since then. Like, because we started in the basement, and we moved to the top floor. Now they're, like, taking over the buildings next door. So it'll be, like, a complex of 3 buildings.
So it's set up
Not
like
to mention
the game
all the other
was,
ones
then.
across.
Yeah. Did you guys walk around like this, too? That's good.
I mean, you're working on caves and you're in a basement, and you can, like, kind of lose track of time.
Speaking of which, can you tell us, I mean, there's a story that I'm aware of that I want to hear you actually audibly talk about, which is, can you talk about the cart?
Yeah, you want the cart story?
Oh, yeah! I definitely want the cart story.
Okay, so, you know, everybody knows the Skyrim intro at this point. Like, it's a meme, and it comes up all the time.
Right.
But back then, like, it was just this meeting that I swear I went to it like 100 times. So I watched that. We would sit there and watch that opening over and over just to see how it is and, like, keep polishing and stuff. But that thing was breaking constantly because that cart was physically simulated and not just on a track. Like, other things that we've done, like the intro of Point Lookout, that's just an animation. It will just do its thing.
Right.
But the cart in Skyrim, it's physically simulated with the cart, and the wheels will bounce on the road, which, like, I don't even think you can see the wheels, so I'm not really sure why that's a thing. So physics in games are really, really hard, and physics with vehicles is even harder, so that would break all the time. Like, people would make the road too bumpy, and then it would start to shake and bounce off. Somebody would go through and clutter the space, and, like, put a rock too close to the road. It would hit the rock and freak out. But then one time, after we'd smoothed all that stuff out, it's like the road is perfectly smooth, there's no rocks, it's fine. And the cart's going down it yet again, you know, meeting number 150 or whatever. And then the cart just stops and it starts vibrating like this. You're like, what is going on? And then it just, boom, shoots up into the sky. You're like, what? What broke now? So we restarted again, and the cart goes, and it's fine. You, like, do it over and over, and it's fine. But every once in a while, that happens. And so if somebody has to go and find out what's going on, and turn on all these commands to see, like, what is colliding with what, and you see this little box floating past the road, and you're like, what is that? And it's the bee in the game. Because there was a separate bug where it's like, oh, I can't pick the bee to make this potion or whatever. Because it didn't have the right kind, because it's tiny bee, and you could just, like, run through it.
Right.
But somebody fixed it and put on a collision. But there's 2 types of collision for this kind of thing. There's, like, solid stuff like a jar or something that you want to bump into, or like flowers and stuff that you just run through those, but you can pick them. So it was the solid kind that got put on the bee. So that bee is going down the path, and it's AI, so AI doesn't get pushed around the same way like a jar. So it's just going to stand there.
Right.
Whereas the cart, that comes along, and that also wants to just keep going this way, but it can't. So it's like an immovable force, and it'll just, which way can it go? Up. That's it. That's the only way it can go. And like those forces just sort of multiply, and that's why it goes so high. It's kind of like when the giant hits you in Skyrim, but even worse. So that's the beast story.
How high are we talking? Like, how far up did it go? Like up into the atmosphere?
You could see it so far.
That is funny.
Like shockingly high.
Yeah.
You would always, people always ask us, like, why isn't there just like a limit on how fast a thing can go? What possible reason is there? It's like, well, I guess adding a limit would make it go slower, so the game needs to run fast.
So in the end, the insect is the thing that wins over. So when you're
the
driving,
bug.
So did you just remove it, or how did you end up compensating for that in the end?
So someone just put on the right kind of collision where you can just run through it. So if the bee does happen to come, the cart will just keep going through it.
That's
and then
good.
Elsewhere, you can pick it. Mm-hmm. But, apparently that thing still breaks to this day. Apparently if you have like 120 hertz monitors, it'll freak out because physics is tied to frame rate, which is not ideal.
Right.
But when people told me that, I'm like, yeah, that checks out. I get that.
That sounds like what we worked on.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. That is a great story. Can you, speaking of like Skyrim and with Fallout, and I know since we're talking a little bit about physics and the environment, I mean, when people play, they're seeing everything, all the layers, they're seeing everything as if it was just all one thing. So, you see arms, or you see the Pip-Boy, or you see whatever, and then the environment's behind it. And there's, can you talk a little bit about how that's not all one thing and why it's not? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Like how first-person animations are separate from the real world?
Yeah.
I mean, some engines do it in a way where it's like more cohesive, and if you have a gun, it will like poke into rocks unless they tell it not to. But it's easier if you don't do that, and that's why you don't have like hands in the Fallout games that can go and pick up stuff, because the way it's rendered, it's like a completely separate thing.
Right.
With a bunch of tricks to, like, sometimes they don't even have shadows in a lot of games because of this, because it's not the same reality almost.
Right.
So that's why you can take your gun then in these games where it renders this way and just go right up against a wall.
Yeah.
And it looks fine.
Uh-huh.
It's like, well, that gun is like 6 feet long shotgun thing. Like, shouldn't it be sticking in there? Because then you have so many other problems to solve. Like, oh, but then it needs to like pull up like this if you're close to the wall.
Right, right.
So it's sort of deciding which thing is more important, and for some games it is being able to like reach out and grab things in the environment, but for the Bethesda games I would say that scope is the most important thing, and we don't have time to solve the things like that.
Right.
So it's an easier way to have it as just a separate render pass.
Well, and the reason why that becomes important is like when we're trying to do, like with the Pip-Boy, trying to make something that's in a game in real life, some of the perspectives and things change up on it. Like Chris was bringing up the fact that when you go in, for example, in Fallout, you go to pick up one of the holotapes. I think I've got one back here. Yeah, okay. You go to pick up a holotape. On the table, it's like this big, and then you grab it, and then it's this big, and you stick it in the thing, and it becomes a different size. And it's like, well, how big is that actually? Like, how do we turn that from that into real world, and what size is it, kind of thing? And
yeah, because one size works really well for that first-person animation of sliding it in there. Another one works really well for it sitting on the table and anyone realizing it's actually there.
Yeah, seeing it. Yeah, right. Or the magazine, be able to see the magazine and then pick it up and see it there. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
That's
handy being able to divorce those two things.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's
without going like the gamey way too, because a lot of games will just be like, make it sparkle.
Oh yeah,
like the little flashing and stuff.
Yeah,
like that.
or the light up behind it kind of thing. Yeah, something like that.
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't happen that way in the real world.
Yeah, important to the way those games feel is to not do that, and that's part of why people appreciate the clutter and stuff like that. Because in those games where everything flashes, your brain kind of like shuts off, at least for me, and you're just like, pick up the shiny thing versus like what's on this table, and you actually find stuff and pay attention.
Oh yeah,
which I think is an interesting feel.
What are the games that you play or that you find are kind of like inspirations, or that you've in the past kind of inspired you to want to go into this?
Like to go into games, period?
Yeah, or even even now, things that kind of just get that you might not have been involved in. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, for getting into games originally, like the original Fallout games actually is one of the big ones for why I got into it.
Oh, it is? Oh, wow.
So that was kind of a dream to work on those games.
Wow,
But,
okay.
well, for now, the ones that I've found the most inspiring are games like Subnautica and The Outer Wilds, because I really like exploration games that don't sort of hold your hands, and there's like the sense of mystery where you
Right.
don't know what to expect,
Uh-huh.
which is sort of counter to the other style of, say, like open world games where it's more of the checklist, which I personally am not into,
Yeah.
where it's like, this is how many of the things to do. There's like 40 of this kind of event, 6 of this one. Like, I'd rather not know. Like, don't
Right.
tell me anything.
Okay.
Because I like to get immersed, you know?
Yeah. Find it yourself and be able to do more things. Do you just play on screen, or do you do any of the VR stuff?
I do. My headset is like right here.
Is it? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I actually use it for making the games now, too. So
Do you really?
Good.
Okay. So you
I
can...
use it for some sculpting.
Oh, you do? Oh, okay.
I think it's like a really natural way to work.
Can you use that for ZBrush and things? Or
Not for ZBrush itself, but there's another program called Medium, which
yeah.
it's not quite as refined as ZBrush. So what I've done is like the main basic sculpts of the forms in Medium,
right?
but then bring it in to do like, skin pores and stuff like that in ZBrush.
No kidding. I've played around
really
with
nice.
Medium. I didn't know that it was that high of a level to. Yeah, that's pretty good. Okay.
Yeah, as long as you like crank up the detail on your sculpt high enough, you can get quite a bit done in there.
Well, and you can
And
lean
it's really
in.
fun for weapons too. Right, you can just like get to all the nooks and crannies really easy.
Yeah.
Like navigating in ZBrush, I'm sure for like character artists who are used to it, they're totally fine with it. But for everybody else who uses it like sometimes, like me,
Right.
like that program is from another planet.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's although I mean it runs on some. It's weird because I've been able to run it on some really basic setups before on really basic computers, and then at other times it will crash instantly if you're doing the right thing with it. I've got some questions people actually sent me for you.
Sure.
The first one is one of the best ones. This is by Leo Abelos. He asks, he says, just an honest question. How are you? There you go. That's the first question.
Yeah, busy, I would say, because I'm, in addition to being a solo dev, I also have my kids at home. So it's me raising the kids and working. So I like work when they're napping or sleeping usually. So I have a pretty weird schedule.
Right. Your wife's doing a medical degree, or is she doing?
Yeah, she's in her medical residency. So that's a pretty busy time.
Yeah, I'd say so. I got another question for you here. It's this one says, "What's your favorite game? Oh, well, what's your favorite game that you've worked on, and why?" And then he also says, "Thanks for all your hard work." That's James Lehman that wrote that.
Maybe Fallout 4, because that one has a lot of spaces that I really liked working on, and it went really smoothly, and release went great.
Mm-hmm.
So it was fun building Diamond City and all the railroad stuff.
I think there's a lot of
Lighting
things
the
you
whole
don't get
thing.
credit for in there. As far as like Diamond City and things, I mean, there's not just Diamond City. There's Diamond City this season. There's Diamond City that season. There's, I mean, it changes, does it not?
Like the holidays that we
yeah, like if you crank up the timeline, if you speed it up, there's a lot of things that happen in there. Can you talk at all about that? Like some of the things that it gets decorated with or that occur?
I just kind of threw that in for fun once and got a designer to help me out. It was like, hey, if I throw a bunch of Christmas and Halloween decorations around, will you check the Pip-Boy timer and turn it on?
Mm-hmm.
They're like, sure, fine. So that's kind of how that got in. It's not like it was on the schedule. I just like it getting decorated, so I thought it would be cool. And it's not super hard. Like on my end, it didn't take that long to throw around a bunch of decorations.
How long before you started hearing people actually comment on it or notice it? Did you? Did people?
I feel like no matter how small of a thing I sneak into the games, I'll hear about it like the first day.
Really?
So many people end up playing it.
Wow.
I mean, in 76, I like scrawled stuff on the top of Seneca Rocks. I'm like, oh, totally, no one is going to find this. And people are like, what's this mean? Like, seriously? Already?
Did you have actual meaning behind them, or did it?
Yeah, that one was like a nickname for my wife and me. At first, it was Astro Panda up there. And then I later added my daughter's names next to it.
Oh, that's awesome.
You need like a jetpack to get up there.
Still, but people found it right away, huh? That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
I guess there's always
roll
those
with it
people.
and sneak stuff in.
Yeah. What are there any things that you think nobody's found yet? Is there any Easter eggs that you can bring up, or that you feel like?
I feel like everybody's found everything.
Really?
Like
Wow.
even the stuff that I tried to hide fairly well, people found it. Like there was the interloper in 76. Like
Yeah.
it's in a deep dark cave behind a bunch of roots, so you can't even see that there's another like hallway.
Right.
And, like down the winding path. Like you really have to look for that one. But again, people found it right away.
Wow.
It's like just a law of numbers. Enough
Yeah.
people throw a million people, they'll find it.
True. Yeah. So if once when you get into the game, if you just start looking for every cranny, you're gonna get
Yeah.
something probably. Huh. Well, that makes the job fun though. I mean, you get to be able to sneak things in and insert some of yourself into it. That's pretty special. Did they ever prevent
Yeah.
you from doing things, or did you ever feel like you were limited on what you could do? Or
No, and really, as art lead, I kind of actively encouraged it because I think that's what makes those things interesting to explore. Because if it's all sort of sterilized and uniform, that's not that interesting. But if people are putting all these sort of personal touches, as long as it's not too pop culture referencey or, just frankly, like we should go to HR weird kind of thing,
oh,
then we've had to throw out a couple things like that. But usually it's fine. Like and pop culture references can be okay, but it has to be like subtle enough, not just super, super obvious and constant. So there's like this fine line on that. Because I know like the original Fallouts did it, but there's definitely a line where it becomes too goofy, so we tried not to overdo that.
right. What about as far as limitations of what the game could do? I mean, where you come up with an idea, but at the same time, sure, it works on your rig at home, but would it work on everybody's computer when they try to play it? Do you ever have limitations like that where they say you need to scale this back, or I don't know, dial it down a little?
Usual performance concerns, yeah. So you just have to keep an eye on that always. But it's usually the same kind of things that'll break it, where someone throws in too many shadowcasters. Like that, nine times out of 10, that's what it was. Someone
Was it?
added shadowcasters and they shouldn't have. You're like, please stop adding lights. I've got it. Because those have like, you could put in one shadowcaster and that would be the same budgetary cost as like 500 tin cans or something. So it's like, just don't put in the shadowcaster. Go nuts on the tin cans and all the clutter. You could put quite a bit of clutter in those games and it ran pretty well.
What with Unreal, with all the engine updates and things, and now with some of the newer video cards, do you feel like it's easier to, as far as the lighting, over time for you, creating lighting in games and making things that look realistic, do you feel like it's easier now, or?
Definitely. Like on Skyrim, you could only have like 4 lights touch any one particular object, for instance. So you'd have these giant pillars in a cave, and you're like, how am I going to possibly light a cave and only have 4 things touch it? Because that was also what they would call a spherical bound check. So even though it was like this skinny tall pillar, it was actually like if you just spun it around like a sphere. So that would cover this enormous area. And then you're like, oh, well, I guess I just got to make some really big lights. That was very tough. So over time, I can place more and more lights. Like in Fallout 4, I could place hundreds of lights then, and it didn't have that limitation. And as long as they didn't overlap with the lights themselves too much, they'd generally run pretty fine. So you could have like 100 candles in a row, and as long as they were small, like you're fine.
Right.
So that's why in Fallout 4, all the light was actually bounced by hand. And normally that's the kind of thing they bake, where a light will hit the ground and bounce off magically through programmer science.
Right.
But that was all me just copying around lights in Fallout 4, because we now could, which was a big change. But then, in 76, that was automated, and so we could shine the light at the floor and have it just propagate the light for us. So that was a huge time saver.
Or
And then,
reflective surfaces, those used to be hard.
yeah,
Yeah.
because if you look at Fallout 4, every single reflection is
Uh-huh.
like some random street in Concord. You're like, I'm inside like this cave, and why do I see this street?
Right.
Versus 76, we capture what's in the room, so you'll actually see what's there. It's like kind of low res,
Uh-huh.
but it is that room, so the colors actually match.
Wow.
So that kind of stuff is going to just keep improving. Like with ray tracing, it'll be like even better reflections, much, much higher resolution.
Right.
Dynamic, too.
Where did you, I mean, you probably get this question a lot, is where did you learn, I mean, that piece, like the harder stuff, the stuff that you don't see or people just kind of assume, oh, well, that's just magic. Like, you just you create the world and it's, you know, it's like anything else, it just happens. It's science. Like, yeah, where did you learn this? Was it on the job, or did you, like, how did you get this background?
Yeah, I've just done it sort of on the job since I started, because there was always sort of a hole where other people were doing world art and character art. And like, well, who's doing the lighting? I'm like, well, I think it's cool. So I just kind of fell into that. And
Uh-huh.
I don't know, it's one of those jobs that has like a really great return, because you get this like unlit, ugly space.
Right.
Not that it's like inherently ugly, but you go in there and do lighting passes. And you're like, wow, it looks so different, so amazing. So
Yeah.
like, sweet, that took 30 minutes.
It goes from being cold to alive kind of thing. You're changing
Yeah, it makes a huge difference as soon as you throw in the lighting. So, and I've always liked it, and it's also a nice aspect of like how the game plays and how you lead the player. So there's like this design aspect to it too,
Right.
not just how it looks, but how it plays. It's very important.
Okay, so you're playing older versions of Fallout. Like, I don't know what version you're talking when you were first inspired to actually working for Bethesda and things. What happened in between there?
Well, back in the day, I was making like Half-Life 1 mods. So I was the lead of my own Half-Life mod called Desert Crisis, and I also worked on a mod called Action Half-Life.
Uh-huh.
And then kept doing that, and then went to college to make art for games, and then sort of applied to every single game company on the planet. It was like 220 applications or something.
Wow.
And only 2 of them said yes, and it was like Ubisoft and Terminal Reality in Texas. And I was like, well, Canada's too cold, so I'm going to go to Texas.
Right.
That's kind of how it started.
Those are both good options, though. I mean, that's pretty good for putting it out that first time. What would you recommend to people that are wanting to get into it now? Like,
I mean, I recommend mods to people always, because I think a lot of people, when they're getting ready to make games, especially on the art side, they sort of focus on these portfolio pieces. And you're not going to be making portfolio pieces when you're making a game. You need to know how to make a game, and how it actually integrates into an engine, and how that all fits together, working with a team. So that's why I think making a mod is like a lot more valuable.
so even if you're doing the school thing, you ought to be coming home at night and building and tweaking and whatever.
Yeah, or
whatever's
like,
out there.
Use Unreal or something also. Basically,
Yeah.
make a real game. I think that's what you should be doing.
Yeah. Then you get to see all the difficulties and the hassles, and have to be creative and work around it. That's cool. Okay.
And like how to hit dates.
Yeah. do you still go back and look at any of your old mods or anything like that? Or
Every once in a while, yeah, because people occasionally do like meetups and still play the mod.
yeah.
So it's fun to go back to that.
Yeah.
It was one, as far as I know, the first game that ever actually sold hats for money, because we actually let people donate to like pay for server costs and things like that, and we would make custom hats and heads for them, and then tie it to like their Steam ID, and then it would have a custom head. Little did I know that like later TF2 would make millions of dollars doing that.
Right. Well, yeah. I missed that game actually. That was a good game.
Yeah, I love TF2.
Oh, I got another question for you. Actually, this is related, so I'll let them ask the question here. If you could have any fully functional prop from any video game, Bethesda or otherwise, what would it be? And that's by FBI.
Fully fun. That's tough. Probably one of the guns from Fallout, like the Gauss rifle or something.
Oh, okay. Do you have any props? Like, do you collect anything that...
I mean, I have like the Pip-Boy back behind me.
Oh, do you?
See it right now? Yeah. Let me see if we can. There it is.
Oh yeah, there you go. Okay.
Yep, wrong way. There. So I have a few of those. So it's mostly all the random stuff I've gotten from work.
Did they have a lot of those around there? The stuff that's as far as like the collectible stuff?
Yeah, there was tons of it, and every once in a while, like the guy that runs the merch department, he'd be like, open up his closet and just let people run wild and pick whatever they wanted.
Oh, really?
So that was always fun. That was usually after happy hour.
Ah, okay. Send me your address. I'll mail you something.
Right.
You might like. So yeah. What's I got another one for you here? I keep forgetting this. Some of the things I wanted to ask you, the other people wrote too, so I'll let them have the ability to do that. Oh yeah, something else. One thing that I had a question for you about, it goes back to the heavy metal piece, which was because you do like it a lot, and it comes up plenty. Has heavy metal influenced or made it into any of your work? Like, have you snuck in any things that are either, I don't know, either inspired by or that are kind of a hidden prop or something that's heavy metal or related to one of the groups that you like? Or
I don't think I've done any direct references. More of just aesthetically speaking. I guess I've done a lot of like the Raiders and gore, and like apparently I've done corpse art in like 3 games now.
Okay. So, a lot of stuff that could be cover art. Aesthetic. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. That works.
People on spikes.
Yeah. So, who are some of your favorite heavy metal bands?
I like a whole bunch of different ones. One of my favorite ones is the band ISIS. Not the terrorist group, but like post metal.
Yeah.
Like they were always one of my favorites, and like PELICAN is another one that's really good. Yeah, it's really hard for me to just narrow it down. I like SOULFLY a lot.
Oh yeah.
So I like the primitive drumming and stuff they had.
Sure.
They were one of my favorite shows back in the day.
Oh, okay.
But I also like industrial metal a whole bunch, so KMFDM is one of my favorites.
It's like having to pick out a favorite child, you know?
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite child?
Pick the genre.
Do you feel like your taste has changed over time too, both in games and in some of the stuff that you do? I mean, do you find yourself kind of depart some things?
I mean, I just kind of go through different phases of things that I like. Like musically, I was into Irish punk for a while. Then it was like Hotline Miami came out, so like the whole synthwave thing. I listened to tons of that. Lately, I've been listening to a whole bunch of, I would say, primitive music. Like High Lung is this band that's really cool, where they play like with instruments made out of bone and wear giant antlers. And I just think it's fascinating.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. Do you feel like you have a style that when people look at your work, they can say, "Oh yeah, that's neat." So that's.
Yeah, I think people have pointed this out. Anytime I do a city, it's probably going to have a bunch of string lights everywhere.
You do have a lot of string lights. I didn't know. Is that true in
Skyrim
too?
Like sort of the soft lighting. Well, not in Skyrim, but it does have lots of like glow fills and god rays. And, like my wife always calls it the light you like, when it's like the god rays coming through clouds and stuff. Because I just like sort of like that volumetric lighting to help fill a space and define the shapes of it.
Yeah.
As opposed to just not flat, but regular lighting without all the fog and mist and things moving around.
Well, it gives it more of that element, like there's elements that are actually in it. There's actually something it's interacting with too, versus just light. And
yeah, just hitting the surfaces that are there. So I like the way it defines the space, and just think it looks cool and like a little bit ethereal, I suppose.
Right. Wow, that's cool. Did you ever? I mean, we were talking about props earlier. I don't know if you can speak to this or if you knew about this. So one thing that Chris brought up when I was interviewing him. Did you see the Chris interview at all that I did?
Not the whole thing yet.
No, that's it's like 3 hours long. No, but because he talked about he went to the. I mean, when they made the Pip-Boy, it was actually supposed to come out with other things with it. And one of the things was supposed to be the stand. Do you know about this?
I know about some of the things that were supposed to come out that didn't come out.
Yeah. So he had So the stand that they eventually did actually release separately, but so he had designed the stand and things, and this is before the release of the game. And then I guess he went to it just cost wise, it didn't make sense, I guess. And so then he went to the big premiere, which was it was like in the top of a car park, like the one that you see in the video, which had the giant tent on the top. I'm guessing you were there, but I don't know. Yeah. And they introduced the game, and the preview of 76 starts, and he's watching it, and then all of a sudden, out comes they go to get the Pip-Boy, and it pops out, slides out, and there's his stand, and he didn't know it was going to be in the game, and so he went up there and he's like, "Hey, you used my stand." And they said, yeah, I guess we should probably giving you credit for this if it just looked like it was really in World, so he put it in, and we thought maybe it was ours. But I mean, like, did you ever have anyone like that? Like, did you know about that at all? Or
I mean, yeah, I think we got it from like one of the reference shots, and I was just like, well, this is the thing that it's supposed to be on, so go ahead and use this.
Yeah, in the end, I think it made him pretty happy, actually, because they also put the kit inside the game itself and stuff.
Yeah,
I thought that was neat too. Yeah, that was pretty cool. But like, did you ever have anyone sneak up to you and just say, "Hey, thinking that something that was theirs was that you've used something that's theirs, but really it was either a unique idea or it's just something that's real common that happened to be in the game"?
Not that I can think of, but it does remind me of one thing where, the red stars that are on all the houses in 76?
Yeah.
At one point, it was a discussion of like, oh, we should take those off because everyone looks like communists. Like, wait, what? Are you serious? Because I think for people who haven't been like in the middle of nowhere, they don't realize that those are on like 80% of the houses.
Right.
So that was just kind of funny that, no, that red star is not actually a bunch of communists. Like,
although it could still play in the game either way, I guess.
Yeah, maybe it's
just
true.
Feel like,
maybe
all right.
they are.
Yeah, maybe it isn't. I don't know. That's.
I mean, there is a giant underground communist base in West Virginia, so who knows?
Well, yeah. So, with your current game that you're working on, which we can't talk too much about, but at the same time, do you see like the lighting that you use in the other games and things like that? Like, do you notice some things that are definitely you, or that are kind of sneaking through in it?
I think so. We'll get that sort of atmospheric feel that I was talking about. I'd like to have that and not just go totally naturalistic with the lighting. Like, it's open world, so I can say there's like a bunch of wilderness, but at the same time I want that to feel alien in its own way. Kind of a little bit surrealistic inspired. Like, I've always been a big fan of like Giger and things like that. So there'll be a little bit of weirdness there.
How long do you think this is going to take you? I mean, real world buildings, I mean, is world building. Like, how long do you think?
And it's going to take me a few years, at least. But I'm also going to be using stuff like Houdini to sort of procedurally place and build the landscape itself.
Okay.
So even though it is open world, in some way I think that can be easier to build. If you're doing something that's a lot more like wilderness focused. It's all about locations and urban areas. That's the time consuming thing.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're like, hey, I want a big area with a bunch of trees and rocks, like,
right,
that's not that complicated.
You can
it's more complicated on the system side, but yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, there are rules for where those things are, where they're supposed to be.
Right.
Like, if you're placing it by hand, you're kind of just wasting time.
Right.
You can always generate it and adjust it after
to
get the look you want, but you shouldn't do it the whole way.
Or you can use randomization and things like that. The computer can, but you can't do that
that's
with
how we
houses.
did it in 76 also. Like, we did the initial landscape and auto-populated it with trees and stuff, and that really helps you get a feel early on. And that wasn't the case in like Skyrim and Fallout 4. Those were all placed by hand. So for a long time, it was very empty in between anywhere someone had like actually put stuff.
Right.
So it's really hard to get a feel at that early stage.
Did you ever build anything that was beyond the boundaries? Like, later on, what people could play fell outside of what they could ever possibly see or access?
We defined those boundaries pretty early, so you know where the edge of the world is.
Yeah, okay. So
there was like a couple locations that we were thinking might be there in 76. Like, very, very, very early, but then it would be like
no, that's where the river's going to be, so let's just chop that one off and move it somewhere else.
Okay.
And they were all sort of temped in with like just the exact same building at first, just like to get a feel for how far it is to walk between things, because
Right.
you just want to try that out early on. It's like just a bunch of random trees and the same house, just at the right spots for where something nice is going to be later, and then actually go and walk it yourself. Don't just fly around in the editor, but walk it and see how it feels.
Are you working first then on the world itself, or do you come up with a story? I mean, what's your process for developing this? How do you, what do you come up with first? Are you building your set basically in your head, or then do you have a story in mind first, or?
There's kind of a loose story, but I'm starting kind of with the systems of the game itself first, and I started with my initial prototype of like, here's my 5 seconds of fun, is this basic idea that I have any fun, and I built the systems for that. And now I'm expanding it out into my vertical slice, which is like a larger, but not super large open world to even get a better feel and like really flesh it out. For like, can I play this for an hour?
Right.
And then based on how long all that stuff takes, be like, well, I think I can build this much stuff, this many creatures, this many locations, and sort of scope it to that, and refine the plot also along the way for not just my loose notes on that.
How about movie inspirations? Are you as far as, I mean, horror? Are we talking horror, sci-fi-ish horror? What are you talking?
I almost use like the term horror-ish because I like having like monsters and stuff like that, but I don't want to do something that's just purely horror focused, like an Amnesia game where you're just like walking around in the dark with a lighter or something.
Right.
Like those games are fine, but I almost just like the aesthetic inspirations. And apparently some people don't agree with me on this, but I think like the Resident Evil games, for instance, are really not that scary. They're just kind of like horror inspired to me. Like they have jump scares, but it's not scary.
Yeah.
So it's maybe leaning a little bit more towards that, where there's monsters and things, but it's not about being scared the whole time.
That means too that you have an actual story that's driving it versus just stuff to fill the time and space.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Or distractions. I do know some people that actually worked on some of the earlier games as far as the Resident Evil stuff.
Oh,
and
cool.
They openly said that they put things into the game to distract you from the things that they didn't want you to look at. And so, because the earlier ones were kind of rough. So, but yeah, that was kind of part of their plan was, I'll put in this thing and we'll make it look this way. And then you won't notice that we have 3 of this over here and stuff like that. But anyway.
It's a good way to make a game.
Yeah. So is this all self-funded, or how are you doing what you do these days?
Yeah, right now I'm just saved up and going for it and trying. Like, we'll see what happens along the way, but that's what I'm trying for now.
Okay. Like, if people wanted to contribute or anything like that, like, do you have anything out there for that, or do you have, or anything like?
No, I don't have like a Patreon or anything.
No.
Like,
thought about it?
When I announced the game, I've thought about it. I haven't had that many people ask me about it, so I haven't really put too much thought into it.
Let's pitch something right now. Let's get some people.
I figured there'd be a much larger call for that kind of thing once I actually like say what I'm doing for real.
Yeah. I mean, you've done some big projects. You worked for some big companies. When you started doing solo projects, because you talked quite a bit about solo projects, and now going into this venture, is do you feel like people are pretty supportive, or do they? I mean, what's the general family functions or whatever when they ask you what you're doing? Like, how's it come across?
I think most people are like, just you? That's it? But in my defense, I think tools are much different than they were like even 10 years ago. So I think it's a lot more possible. Like I've mentioned how I'm going to use Megascans for Unreal 5. Like there's a lot of art that I don't have to make because I don't have to do a bunch of rocks and boring stuff.
Right.
Not that rocks are boring, but like, do we need to throw more game devs' lives at rocks still? Or can I just take out that rock and modify it to suit my own needs and save a bunch of time?
Right. Yeah. So using libraries and things too, or do you?
To spend more time on what actually makes the game unique, as opposed to all of those things that you might see
like when they go and make a movie, people aren't like, yo, I'm going to invent fire from scratch. But that's kind of how video games go. People are constantly like reinventing everything. And at some point it's like, okay, I think we've matured enough. Maybe you don't need to do everything from scratch all the time.
Yeah. Well, then you might also get into the, you remember in the 1980s, back in the time of like A-Team and stuff like that, like every single episode you always have the same roll, the same jump, and that's because they paid for that little side rail at some point in time, and they had the car and they had the guy that they hired that had to do that, and so that's what they put into every single episode. I think sometimes if you put too much time into something, like an effect, suddenly that's like in everything, like you're using it too much and it's everywhere. There's
definitely a point where it's excessive, and then you get like the asset flips and things like that.
Yeah.
So I think there's a smart way to do it.
Yeah. Invest your time in your story and your character, not in some of the visualizations and the things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
This is Boomer, by the way.
Oh, wow, that is a big cat.
If you're hearing the constant meowing, that's why.
That's awesome. Do you have kids that are old enough to know what you're doing or to know kind of what you've done?
One of them kind of knows. She's like 4.5. She's like, Daddy, I'm going to help you do the art for your game and help you fix it.
Oh, that's cool. Do you, I guess here's a big question for you. Because you're used to working up until now. You've been in teams. You go to, I don't know if you guys have kind of like dailies and stuff. I mean, like where basically there's timelines. There's probably a board with stuff on it. So now it's you. You're the only person that's on, that can be critical of your schedule or what you're doing and things like that. How do you stay productive? Like, how do you not? I don't know.
Good question.
Like you go in to research something and you spend the rest of the day watching Netflix or learning, you're watching videos of bears and small animals.
I do a lot of that stuff that I used to do before, actually. So I actually have a whole schedule where I'm blocking out a certain amount of time for each thing. And I also write dailies for myself.
Oh, okay.
And of like, this is what I did this day. And I usually capture screenshots and video every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And that way it's pretty easy for me to track. Like, am I staying on track, or am I noodling away on this one thing for like 3 weeks when it was supposed to be 2 days?
Right.
And so far that's working really well, especially because that engine is exceeding my expectations. So it's tracking to be like almost twice as fast as I thought it would be in a lot of cases. Sometimes 1.5, but yeah, it's going on track or faster at this point. So obviously that means I need to adjust my metrics then, but that's how I'm staying on schedule.
Wow, that's pretty good. I mean, it would be so easy not to. I mean, like,
I self-scheduled myself a lot when I was at Bethesda because, like, I was the only one who was doing lighting and stuff. So I'd be like, I've got it. You don't need to like have a whole producer just telling me what to do. So
sure.
And when 76 started, I actually scheduled the art team for about 6 months. So not to say I'm a producer, but I have some experience with that. And
right. But over there, I mean, somebody's going to check in on you eventually, right? I mean,
eventually, yeah.
Eventually, somebody's going to ask, what have you been doing?
But I think one of the things you kind of have to learn making Bethesda games is like how to get stuff done and get it done fast. Because especially in the early days, like the scale of people that we had versus how much we had to get done is not even close to what other companies were at the time.
Yeah.
So you kind of learn a lot of tricks on how to get the best bang for your buck. Not to say like to do the worst thing as fast as possible, but how to make it look nice still. But maybe you don't have to spend 2 weeks doing it. You can find a way to do it in a day.
Yeah. What about, I mean, you mentioned research. When you're doing things that are mechanical, like getting back to like the Pip-Boy, for example, it has a screen that's about this thick, but it's supposedly like a cathode screen, right? Or you have, or there's all these mechanics and things like in there. As an artist and as a game person, I mean, you don't have to worry about any of those mechanics and things, and so making it into real world isn't a big deal. But at the same time, like, do you ever feel like you have to figure out some of the how it works, or what, or the whether or not something's realistic, or ever feel like you need to abandon something because you can't make it?
I think it's good to know
all of those things for when you're making something like that, even if you kind of diverge from it a little bit. Like the amount of research I've done on like baseball stadiums and steel smelters and things is kind of absurd. And whether or not that comes across in the game, I don't know, but it was useful to know sort of the visual organization of an object and how you're going to build it, even if you do then have to be like, oh, but the player needs to go here, or we need to squish the city by 60% because that's way too big in real when you're playing the game.
Right.
But it's a good starting point instead of just like, I completely made this up and I have no idea.
Yeah.
So you got to kind of like ground it all.
Yeah. Yes, I guess the science, there does have to be some level of science knowledge about some things because otherwise it just won't work and realistic.
Yeah, or it just looks bad and you don't really realize why. It's kind of like the same thing when you're doing creatures and stuff. You need to look at the real anatomy, even if you're doing something completely weird. Like,
oh yeah,
there are rules for the way things work.
Yeah. Well, yeah, if you're going to do a zombie, you got to know what's underneath and how that moves differently or falls out.
Yeah.
What's your favorite tool that you use right now?
Like program?
It can be a program or it could be something physical too.
Like a screwdriver?
Could be.
I think it's probably Blender since I've been really enjoying working with that one.
Is it? Do you use a mouse or are you using? I mean, do you have a tablet or something like a Wacom or something, or what are you doing?
Let me see if I can get it. Well, I have my just regular mouse.
Okay.
But it's like with weights and stuff on the inside because I like to have it like a heavier mouse. And then over here is like a giant tablet, and then the VR gear for doing the sculpting.
Okay.
And this is also my other computer behind me. So that's like where I run my Perforce Depot.
Uh-huh.
So I also version control and back up all my stuff too.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Have you had any tragic stories related to saves or losses or crashes?
I mean, not that I've done it myself because I've been doing this long enough that I know that stuff will always happen. So I constantly save and autosave and back up and have redundant backups. But it does remind me, I think it was Fallout 3 before they had really set up version control at that point. Like the build would just get put on the folders and people would copy it with a batch file.
Oh.
So at one point, someone went to go and get the build, and what they did instead was they just dragged that folder to their desktop and had all the other source files and stuff for it also. So people were like, what happened to all the files? They're gone.
Oh.
And it turns out some animator just dragged it to their desktop.
Was it at least still on their desktop, or did they?
They got lucky and it was still on their desktop.
Oh, man. Yeah,
that's not a good way to do things.
No. That is pretty scary. I'm sure there was a lot of hearts that stopped on that piece. That's pretty funny. What about as far as favorite thing on your desk? Like, what would you say is the coolest thing on your desk? It doesn't have to be something you use for work, just something cool.
Well, it's probably, that crystal there back behind me.
Yeah.
That's like my 10-year crystal for being at Bethesda.
Oh, really?
There's like an even bigger one when you get to 15. But I only made it to 14.
Wow. That's pretty cool. Does everybody know that? Like,
heavy.
Do they do a little dinner or something, or what's the story behind it?
Yeah, there's like a dinner at 15 years. Before that, it's just crystals and like more vacation weeks.
Oh,
so
vacation weeks is nice too. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I had 5 when I left. That's pretty good.
Wow. Yeah. That's pretty awesome. Did you cash? You can cash that in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something that you also use for your ID or your I don't even know what you call that, logo or whatever. You have a picture of yourself.
Yeah. I should probably take a real headshot at some point, but I have that there for now.
But what so give me the background on that picture. Where are you and what are you doing? It looks like you're like up in a high elevation or something. What are you doing?
That's actually me at Burning Man. So in the middle of a dust storm, you need the dust mask and the goggles. Otherwise, like you'll go blind and can't breathe.
Right.
It's an insane amount of dust. So
just probably
Burning Man was a great time.
it looks because you can see some like shapes behind you and things. that looks like some structures, and then at the same time, I thought maybe you were at a high elevation or something because it looked like you were wearing, you got the Gabinier on you and things like that. So,
Yeah, it might be like the temple there behind me or something.
yeah. Oh, okay. That makes more sense now. I was like, wow, that's got to be a great story. It looks like you're in one of your own environments.
We actually found a Fallout camp when we were there, so that was pretty cool because I went with like the art director on Fallout 3 and 4 Eastbound, so
wow.
that was pretty cool. They were pretty excited.
I bet.
We also fought in the Thunderdome, so that was great.
And obviously you made it out alive, so that's good.
Yeah, that's what happened to Eastbound.
Two go in,
Two
one
men
comes
enter,
out.
one man leaves.
Yeah, yeah. If we're watching for a reveal, when do you think you're gonna actually come out and share more information about your current project?
I'm hoping before the end of the year, but it depends on exactly on how things go because I want to like iterate on the art style a little bit more, but
Sure.
I also need to decide on the final name, so that's been like the harder thing than the art.
Do you have to though? I mean, you can kind of tease it.
I mean,
not really give
if
it.
I'm
a
going to
name.
announce it and like put up a store page, I think it would help to have a name.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's going to be like Untitled Goose Game, which ends up shipping as Untitled Goose Game.
That's already been done. So.
Yeah, that's like one of the lessons of game dev. It's like never put in something that you don't want to ship because it will ship.
You've got a lot more control over this project though than probably anything you've worked on in the past, right?
Yeah, I mean, I really just have to vet it with me and then ask friends and like my wife and everybody if they think I'm on the right track.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's up to me, I guess.
Mostly it's just meetings with yourself at home and
It's a lot more efficient that way, let me tell you.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't have to ask permission or fight over anything. Is that the benefit to being a lead too? Is you get to pick and choose? I mean, what's the benefit to being the lead animator outside of being able to say I'm the lead animator?
Well, I mean,
Or
then
pay?
you end up having to have lots of discussions with people, really. So even if you're the lead, you have to talk to everybody on the team. So that ends up being a huge chunk of time. I mean, you're in meetings all the time and having all these discussions and conveying the intent and explaining why.
Right.
Like, if you're not doing a good job as a lead, you could just be like, do this because I said so. But it's better to explain what you're going for and sort of like the ideas behind the world and what you're thinking and why.
Right.
To get their buy-in, and also if they have any ideas on how they would want to spin it or if they've thought about it even more. Because whoever's actually doing it, they're going to be able to spend a lot more time actually thinking about it than you.
So somebody else that's thinking or has thought about leaving their job and going and starting their own thing. What's your motivational speech? What's your statement that you feel like would sell them on it, get them through it?
I would say just make sure you know what you're getting into, but it's definitely possible, and spend a lot of time doing tutorials and like watching GDC talks, and Unreal's own sources for like their tutorials are also great. So any question that you have, there's going to be an answer out there for it at some point. Like,
Yeah.
You just have to go and find it. So it's tough, but it's a lot of fun.
Do you feel like you have a
And-
community now too that you can kind of pull from?
I think so, yeah. Like there's a lot of indie devs and also a lot of solo indie devs that I've tried to make more and more connections with and ask them like how are they going and like who do you use for your lawyer and things
Right.
like that, because that's one thing I'm not going to do solo. I'm not going to be a lawyer.
Unfortunately, that's an additional piece.
Yeah.
You can't
But
get
that's
around.
the kind of stuff you have to compensate for. Like
Yeah.
you have to write out a budget and a marketing timeline and
Right.
all those things. Like you've got to do every single part of it.
Do you still have contact with people at Bethesda, or do you still? I mean, do you still have like kind of a mini background team that you can run things past, or?
Yeah, I mean, I still live in the area, so a lot of my friends are still here. So I talk to them and send them some stuff and be like, hey, what do you think about this?
You're not completely on your own that way. You could always pull people if you needed to.
Well, not to like actually work on it or
Uh-huh.
anything, because they have their own jobs and
Right.
contracts. But if I just want friends to take a look at stuff, sure.
Well, I really appreciate your time. I
Yeah,
appreciate
no
you like jumping on with this and being willing to talk and answer people's questions. There was one question that somebody wrote, but I couldn't understand what they were trying to ask. I don't know if you'd be able to make it out. They said,
Let's try.
this is Aaron Vilma wrote, I hope it's a video of it. There could be like the fixer from Fallout 76?
Okay, that's kind of hard. I mean, I know what videos are, and I know what the fixer is in 76, but I don't know what they're going for. Well, I'd say they can ping me on Twitter, and I have my DMs open for anybody who has questions.
Yeah.
Which so far I haven't regretted. People have actually been like surprisingly nice. Yeah, no problem.